Willow Bend was the kind of street that made realtors smile. Lined with maples, trimmed hedges, and quiet sidewalks, it was the perfect illusion of peace. Neighbors waved to each other, children rode bikes in circles, lawns stayed neat, and gossip was the only thing that moved quickly. And for a while, that's all there was, until the whispers started. About her, about him, about what they were doing behind drawn curtains and locked doors. No one wanted to believe it. Not really. But after the murder, they weren't surprised. Lydia Monroe was everything you'd expect in a picturesque suburb. Late 30s, graceful, always dressed like she was waiting for someone to knock. She volunteered at the school, hosted dinner parties, and kept a meticulously clean home. But what most people didn't know was that her marriage to Tom Monroe, an insurance adjuster with a short temper and long hours, was quietly falling apart. They had no children. They barely spoke at dinner. He traveled often. She filled her time with community events, yoga, and long walks around the neighborhood, anything to avoid the aching silence of their home. Across the street lived the Hensley family, a boisterous crew with 3 boys. The oldest, Ethan, was just 19, back from his first year at college and working a landscaping job for the summer. He was tan, athletic, a little cocky, the kind of young man who still didn't understand the weight of consequences. Lydia noticed him first during one of his shirtless afternoons mowing the lawn. She would wave politely. He'd smile. It was harmless at first, a flicker of attention in a life that had become invisible. They spoke one day while she was walking her dog. She complimented his work ethic. He joked that she should let him mow her lawn too. They laughed. A week later, he was trimming her hedges for free, then staying for lemonade, then lingering a little longer each time. Ethan thought she was elegant, different, not like the girls he knew from campus. She listened when he talked. She made him feel mature, important. He didn't realize she was using him to fill a void. The first time anything happened between them, it was subtle. A hand on his arm that stayed too long, a look that meant something it shouldn't. The second time, it wasn't subtle at all. They began meeting inside her home during her husband's business trips. It was risky, thrilling, and completely unsustainable. But neither of them stopped. Lydia told herself it was harmless, a distraction, a secret fling that would burn out as quickly as it began. But Ethan didn't see it that way. He fell hard, mistaking lust for love, attention for intimacy. He began texting her late at night, jealous if she didn't respond, possessive if she spoke to anyone else. And still, Lydia didn't stop. She believed she could control it, that she was the adult in the situation, that he would know the limits. But every secret has a half-life, and theirs was about to expire. At first, Lydia convinced herself it was under control. The affair with Ethan Hensley was reckless, yes, but not dangerous. She had rules, only when Tom was out of town, never in public, and never overnight. She told herself it was temporary, a quiet rebellion against a life that felt gray and stagnant. She had no intention of leaving her husband. Ethan was just a secret escape. But secrets have a way of growing teeth. It wasn't long before their meetings became more frequent. Lydia began making excuses to see Ethan, even when Tom was home. Midday errands, grocery runs, and the occasional feigned yoga class. Ethan would sneak in through the back gate, always grinning, always eager. And he was falling deeper. To Ethan, this wasn't just a summer fling. Lydia became something sacred to him, his first real love, his first taste of forbidden passion. The fact that she was older, married, and off-limits only deepened his obsession. He began writing her notes, leaving them in her mailbox. He'd text her at all hours, sometimes just to say he missed her voice. At first, Lydia was flattered, then unsettled. She had underestimated how attached he would become. She told him gently that what they had was fun, but it couldn't last. Ethan didn't respond well. He started asking questions. Was she planning to leave her husband? Did she love him back? Would she tell the truth if Tom found out? "I'm not trying to cause problems," he told her one night after they slept together. "But I don't want to be your dirty little secret anymore." Lydia brushed it off with soft reassurances. "You're young," she said. "This isn't forever, Ethan. You'll meet someone your age and forget all about this." But Ethan didn't want someone his age. He wanted her. He started showing up unannounced. Once, while she was working in the garden, he appeared over the fence with a bouquet of flowers. She panicked. What if Tom had come home early? What if a neighbor saw? Another time, he waited outside the gym where she took spin classes, claiming he just wanted to say hi. Lydia tried to cool things off. She stopped answering his messages. She blocked his number for a while. But the silence only made things worse. Ethan began writing letters, slipping them under her door. His tone had shifted. The desperation now carried an edge of anger. "You used me. You made me believe this meant something. You don't just get to walk away." Still, she didn't tell anyone. Not Tom, not a friend, not the police. She was too afraid, not of Ethan, but of the fallout, the shame, the scandal, the judgment that would follow if anyone discovered she had been sleeping with the neighbor's son. But it was no longer about shame. Ethan had become unpredictable. One evening, Tom mentioned that Ethan had come by to offer lawn service again. "Strange kid," he said. "Kept asking if you were home." Lydia's heart nearly stopped. It was the first time Ethan had crossed into Tom's awareness. She tried to play it off. "He's probably just bored," she said. "College boys always are." But she knew better. Ethan wasn't bored. He was spiraling, and the more she tried to distance herself, the more dangerous he became. Lydia had ended things. At least, she thought she had. After Tom's offhand comment about Ethan showing up, she stopped all contact. No more texts, no more rendezvous, no more slipping through the cracks of her double life. It had to end, before it destroyed everything. But for Ethan, it was already too late. The rejection didn't break him. It consumed him. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. He quit his landscaping job and began spending hours loitering around the neighborhood. Neighbors thought it was odd to see him pacing, sitting alone on the curb, watching the Monroe house from across the street. But no one said anything. He was just the Hensley's boy, quiet, moody, probably going through something. Only Lydia understood what he was capable of. She started to feel eyes on her, at the grocery store, on her morning walks. Sometimes her phone would buzz and she'd find nothing, just a blank message or a missed call from a private number. Then came the photos, printed and slipped into her mailbox without a note, pictures of her taken through windows, outside the gym, one even through the blinds of her living room while she watched TV. They weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. The message was clear. "I see you. I still have access." Lydia felt panic rising like bile in her throat. She considered telling Tom, but how could she? How do you admit to your husband that your secret teenage lover is now stalking you? That the boy across the street is unraveling because of something you started? So she stayed silent. She deleted what messages she could, hid the photos. She told herself it would pass, that Ethan would cool off, move on, return to college in the fall, and forget about her. But he wasn't cooling off, he was festering. One night, Ethan stood outside her house for nearly an hour. Lydia saw him through the curtains, motionless, just watching. She considered calling the police, but she froze. If she reported him, everything would come out. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. She felt trapped between two disasters, one public, one possibly fatal. And Ethan? He believed they were still connected, that she was testing him, that her silence was a game meant to punish him. He no longer saw her as a woman with choices. He saw her as someone who owed him something, her time, her love, her loyalty. And soon, he'd decide to collect on that debt. By mid-August, Lydia Monroe was living in constant fear. The summer heat had thickened, but her home remained cold. Every curtain was drawn, every door locked. She jumped at footsteps, flinched at car doors. But none of it stopped Ethan Hensley. He no longer hid in the shadows. He began knocking on the front door, sometimes twice in one day. Always when Tom was gone, always when she was alone. He'd stand on the porch, arms crossed, smiling like nothing was wrong, as if they were still lovers sharing secrets instead of a woman running from a boy she could no longer recognize. She never opened the door, but once she made the mistake of looking through the peephole, he saw her and smiled wider. Later that night, Lydia found a note stuck beneath her windshield wiper. Just one sentence written in shaky, angry pen strokes. "If I can't have you, he can't either." That was the moment something shifted inside her. She had underestimated him, dismissed his instability as youthful drama. But this was different. Ethan wasn't just acting out. He was threatening her husband. The guilt Lydia once felt over the affair had been swallowed by something sharper, terror. But she was still paralyzed. To tell Tom would mean detonating her life. To call the police would mean revealing everything. Instead, she told herself she'd manage it. One more day, one more week, until summer ended and Ethan went back to school. But Ethan had no intention of leaving. He'd dropped out of college weeks earlier, told his parents he needed time to figure things out. In reality, all he had figured out was Lydia. He watched her every move, when she left the house, when she returned, when Tom came home. He began following Tom too, slowly, casually, observing. And then came the unthinkable. One evening, Tom walked into the kitchen, holding something in his hand, a cell phone. Lydia looked up from the stove, heart stuttering. "Someone left this on our back steps," he said. It wasn't either of their phones. Tom powered it on. The wallpaper was a picture of Lydia, sleeping. The blood drained from her face. She knew that image. It had been taken one night after they had been together. She'd fallen asleep in the sunroom. Ethan had stayed longer than she realized. Now, it was in her husband's hand. "Who the hell is this from?" Tom asked. Lydia couldn't answer. Her voice caught in her throat. But she knew. The cracks in her double life had ruptured. Ethan was no longer trying to win her back. He was declaring war. Tom Monroe barely slept that night. He sat in his recliner long after Lydia had gone to bed, staring at the phone they had found on the back steps. The image on the lock screen, his wife sleeping peacefully, haunted him. He didn't know who had taken it or why, but he could feel something was wrong, deeply wrong. He had questions. Lydia had no answers. Or maybe she had them, but couldn't bring herself to speak them aloud. By morning, tension hung in the house like smoke. Tom left early for work, claiming he had meetings. Lydia stayed behind, haunted by the phone's presence and the certainty that Ethan was unraveling faster than she could keep up. She planned to pack a bag, leave town for a few days, tell Tom she was visiting her sister. In reality, she just wanted time to think, to figure out how to end this without exposing everything, without risking more than she already had. But Ethan didn't give her the time. That afternoon, while Lydia was upstairs folding clothes, she heard the doorbell ring. She froze. Then it rang again. A third time, long, insistent. She crept to the landing and peeked through the upstairs window. Ethan. He stood on the porch, shoulders squared, hands behind his back. Calm. Too calm. She didn't move, didn't answer. Then came the banging, first on the door, then on the windows. Her heart pounded as she backed away, nearly tripping over the laundry basket. She reached for her phone, hands trembling, and began dialing 911. "Don't!" came a voice. She turned and screamed. Ethan was inside. He'd come through the back door. She'd forgotten to lock it after letting the dog out earlier. He moved toward her slowly, like someone waking from a dream. "I just wanted to talk," he said, voice low, almost tender. "But you won't even look at me anymore." Lydia stepped back. "You need to leave, Ethan, right now." He shook his head. "You said I meant something to you. You said I was different." "That was a mistake," she whispered. "I'm sorry, but this isn't love. This is dangerous." His face twisted. The calm shattered. "You lied to me," he spat. "You used me, and now you're going to pretend like I don't even exist?" He reached into his jacket. Lydia bolted. She grabbed her phone, raced down the stairs, screaming for help, but he was faster. He tackled her near the front door, knocking her to the floor. The phone skidded out of reach. And then came the blade. He stabbed her once, in the side, then again. She screamed, struggled, tried to push him off, but his grip was wild and desperate, as if he were clinging to a fantasy that was slipping through his fingers. Tom Monroe returned home minutes later, having forgotten his work badge. He found the door ajar, the foyer in chaos, and Lydia bleeding out on the hardwood floor. Ethan stood above her, knife in hand, tears streaming down his face. Tom didn't hesitate. He tackled Ethan with full force, slamming him into the wall. The knife clattered to the ground. In the struggle, Ethan bit and clawed, shouting nonsense, crying out Lydia's name again and again. Police arrived moments later, responding to a neighbor's emergency call after hearing the screams. Ethan was arrested on the scene. Lydia was pronounced dead at the hospital 2 hours later. The perfect neighborhood, once so quiet, had become the site of a brutal murder, a home built on routine and reputation. torn apart by a secret no one was ever supposed to know. The scene officers walked into that evening was chaotic, but the narrative soon became chillingly clear. Lydia Monroe's blood stained the hardwood floors. A kitchen knife, smeared and abandoned, lay just feet from the front door. Her husband, Tom, sat stunned in the living room, hands still trembling. And Ethan Hensley, the boy from across the street, was handcuffed and silent, his face streaked with blood and tears. At first, neighbors couldn't believe it. Ethan, the polite college kid, the one who mowed lawns and helped shovel snow in winter? It didn't make sense. But detectives quickly found the cracks beneath the surface. Ethan was taken into custody and held without bail on suspicion of second-degree murder. He didn't speak for the first 2 days. No requests for a lawyer, no phone calls, just silence. When detectives searched his bedroom at the Hensley house, they uncovered a disturbing shrine. Taped to the underside of his bed were dozens of photos of Lydia, some clearly taken without her knowledge. There were receipts from restaurants they had visited together, scraps of fabric believed to belong to her clothing, and a worn leather-bound notebook filled with increasingly erratic writing. One entry read, "She lied to me, she said I was different. If she won't be with me in life, maybe she'll understand in death." They also recovered the phone left on Lydia's back steps, which had triggered the final breakdown. A digital forensic team confirmed that the device had been wiped and reset before being dropped, but a trace image file of Lydia's sleeping photo was still buried in memory. In Ethan's dorm account from college, police found more evidence, emails to Lydia that had never been sent, ranging from poetic declarations of love to veiled threats like, "If you tell him, I'll disappear. If you leave me, I won't go quietly." Meanwhile, Tom Monroe's statement corroborated the timeline of events. He told police he had arrived unexpectedly, found the front door ajar, and witnessed the aftermath of the stabbing. His injuries from the struggle supported his account, and his call to 911 recorded the chaos as it unfolded. Jessica Hensley, Ethan's mother, was devastated. Through tears, she told investigators she had noticed a change in her son that summer, withdrawn, erratic, but never imagined he was capable of violence. The final blow to Ethan's defense came when Lydia's best friend, confidential until that point, came forward. Weeks earlier, Lydia had confided in her that the affair with Ethan had gotten out of control, and she was afraid of what he might do. She'd never gone to the police, too ashamed, but she had warned someone. That detail made it into the court record. The investigation was swift, the evidence overwhelming. Ethan was charged with first-degree murder, unlawful entry, and criminal stalking. And with that, the story of what really happened on Willow Bend began to emerge, not as a tragic accident, but a calculated unraveling of obsession, secrecy, and a love that never should have happened. The trial of Ethan Hensley began nearly 9 months after the murder, but for the residents of Willow Bend, the wound was still raw. Lawn chairs and picket fences gave way to courtroom benches and news vans. The perfect neighborhood had become a national headline. The media dubbed it the Suburban seduction murder. Tabloids sensationalized the affair. True crime podcasts dissected every diary entry, every message, every pixel of surveillance footage. What stunned the public most wasn't just that a respected housewife had been sleeping with the teenager next door, but that it ended in such visceral, calculated violence. Ethan entered the courtroom, looking pale and thin, dressed in an ill-fitting suit. His expression was vacant, detached, as if he still hadn't grasped the gravity of what he had done. When asked for a plea, he responded in a barely audible voice, "Not guilty." The prosecution built its case with devastating clarity. They laid out the affair, how it began, how it progressed, and how it unraveled. They showed the text messages, the photos, the notebook entries. They painted Ethan not just as a young man scorned, but as someone who had allowed obsession to metastasize into rage. This wasn't an impulsive act, the district attorney told the jury. It was the result of weeks, months of stalking, manipulation, and delusion. He didn't just want her love. He believed he owned her. And when she took that away, he took her life. Lydia's affair with Ethan was laid bare, but so was her growing fear. Her friend testified, tearfully recounting the late-night calls and whispered admissions. Lydia had been afraid to go to the police, afraid of the shame, the fallout, and the destruction of her marriage. Tom Monroe, quieter and leaner than before, took the stand for a single, searing moment. She made a mistake, he said, but she didn't deserve to die for it. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity. They brought in a psychologist who testified that Ethan had suffered a severe emotional break and had exhibited traits of attachment disorder. But under cross-examination, the expert admitted Ethan had no history of mental illness, no clinical diagnosis prior to his arrest. In the end, the jury needed just 5 hours of deliberation. Guilty. On all counts. Ethan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion as the sentence was read. He didn't look at his parents. He didn't glance at Tom. He just stared ahead, the same blank expression he'd worn since the beginning. After the trial, the Hensleys moved away. Their house went up for sale within the month. Jessica Hensley never gave an interview. Neighbors said she aged 10 years in that one summer. Tom Monroe sold the house as well, quietly relocating to another state. He never remarried. The story left a scar across the community, not just because of the murder, but because it exposed something no one wanted to admit. That behind the clean fences and polite smiles, people were lonely, broken, and hiding things that could turn deadly. And for Lydia Monroe, the price of secrecy was paid with her life. In the end, it wasn't the affair that shocked the town most. It was the slow, spiraling descent that followed, quiet enough to go unnoticed, deadly enough to shatter lives. Lydia Monroe wasn't a villain. She wasn't innocent either. She made choices, reckless, selfish, human choices. But those choices didn't justify her death. They didn't explain how a young man could confuse intimacy for ownership, or how something that began with stolen glances across a street could end in blood on a living room floor. Ethan Hensley wasn't just a boy in love. He was a boy unprepared for rejection, unmoored from reason, and consumed by obsession. What began as an affair became a fixation, and then a mission, one he carried out with chilling precision. The case served as a grim reminder of how fragile boundaries can become when secrecy is involved. Lydia thought she could control the narrative, contain the damage, walk away when she was ready. But obsession doesn't follow rules. It doesn't end cleanly. It festers in silence, feeding off what it's denied. In communities like Willow Bend, where reputation often matters more than reality, silence can be fatal. No one suspected the polite teenager of harboring violent intentions. No one thought the perfect housewife might be living in fear. The signs were there, photos in the mailbox, notes, the hovering presence, but no one connected the dots until it was too late. Today, the Monroe house stands quiet. New residents moved in, repainting the walls and reseeding the lawn, unaware of the storm that once lived behind its doors. Ethan Hensley, now inmate number 62,157, will never walk those streets again. And Lydia? She became more than a cautionary tale. She became a name whispered between neighbors, a story too raw to fully tell and too real to fully forget. Let this story serve as a reminder. What begins in secrecy can end in devastation, and love, when twisted by obsession, stops being love at all. If this story struck you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more in-depth true crime documentaries. We want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. Do you think this tragedy could have been prevented? At what point did things go too far? Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, even perfect streets can hide deadly secrets.